All right. Thank you all for coming. This is the meeting of candidates for Secretary of State with Gazette Mail editors. First thing we like to do is introduce ourselves to you, and then we'll ask you to introduce yourselves to us and speak for less than a minute, tell us why you're running, and then we'll do some questions. So we're recording this, as I said, to post the video with the story online. We'll start down here on the end.
My name is Greg Moore. I'm the managing editor of the Gazette.
I'm Whitney Bergamo, editorial writer for the Daily Mail opinion page.
I'm Rob Byers. I'm the executive editor.
There's Kenny Kemp right there. I'm Dawn Miller. I'm the Gazette opinion editor.
Phil Candler, State House reporter.
And everything today is on the record. So we'll start with you, sir. Introduction, and tell us why you're running.
I'm Mac Warner, running for Secretary of State. To stay focused on the job, I want to make better communication with the county clerks, improve that relationship between the local officials and state government. I'm looking to improve the Secretary of State's office, make a better connection between the businesses and the office, and then of course for fair elections. I call myself Mac, easy to vote, hard to cheat warner. I want to make it easy to register, easy to vote, but I want to eliminate those opportunities for improprieties in the electoral process.
Thanks. I'm John Buckley. I'm the Libertarian candidate in the race, the wild card, so to speak, between the Republicans and the Democrats. I live in Hardee County. I've been a candidate before. 2 years ago, I was the Libertarian candidate running for U.S. Senate, and enjoyed the opportunity to come before you all. 2 separate editorial interviews at that time. I think this is going to be much more interesting given the different orientations of your editorial postures. I'm running because I think the Secretary of State's office is that my record is tailor-made for that. I'm a lawyer. I'm a former legislator. I've been the chief administrator of a federal court. I think I can bring a somewhat multi-partisan or non-partisan cast to the office of Secretary of State to assure voters that there is impartiality all across the board in the chief elections officer and the other functions of the office of Secretary of State.
Thanks you all for doing this once again and having us here. I apologize for my voice. It's going to get worse as the more I talk. But thank you. I'm Natalie Tennant. I'm currently Secretary of State, and I'm running for re-election because we are making strides like never before in the Secretary of State's office. I've come to you all before asking for your endorsement from your separate newspapers, now together, and asking for your individual votes as citizens of West Virginia. And I've delivered on the promises that I talked about in running for office. I've delivered on the promise of innovation for our businesses that has helped them streamline the process and help them to save time and money so they can concentrate on creating good jobs. I've delivered on the promise to serve our veterans, whether they're deployed, and making it easier for them to vote. And also when they come back and have that skill, they want to start their own small business, we've waived the startup fee for them. We can talk more about that later. And I've also delivered on the promise of modernizing our elections. West Virginians deserve that. We deserve to have modernized election, top-notch process, and I'm proud, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, of the work that we've done that's been recognized, not just across the state, but nationally too.
Thank you. Who wants to start? Go ahead.
Well, let's start with that because there's been much in the news lately that many states' election databases have been hacked or attempted to be hacked. What's going on with that? And what do you do to safeguard our election database?
And that's a great question. It's a fair question, and it is a concern when you have a candidate who is running around saying if they lose that the election is rigged. And so, that certainly puts a spotlight. And we as election administrators, whether it's in the Secretary of State's office or in the county clerk's office, are accustomed to that. And I, as Secretary of State for the last 8 years, we've been focused on that. We've never taken our eye off security. People just didn't recognize it or really know about that. And when you're talking security, there are two different avenues that you go. You talked, Greg, about the statewide voter registration database, the voter registration. We do have safeguards in place, and we have different levels of security for that system, as we do with all of our databases and systems that we have in the Secretary of State's office. I am not going to sit here and tell you what those are, because the more you talk about your security, the less secure you become. When it comes to the voting system, you know that the counties themselves choose their own voting system. And we had 33 counties back in 2002 when the Help America Vote Act came into play, and there were federal money for the counties to choose. There's about 30 of them now that have touchscreen electronic voting. When you look at those machines, they are not connected to the internet, and they are not connected to each other. So that is a secure measure when it comes to vulnerability from the internet. They're not connected to the internet, so they're less vulnerable. There is a verified paper ballot, which is what our legislature required of any voting system when counties were choosing. So we have a verified paper ballot, so that's security number 2. Security number 3 is there's redundancy within the machine that secures, and then there's also the separate flash card when counties are adding up the results. And so we are secure in that manner, and we are never too careful, because it's 2016 and we hear story after story, and we are vigilant. And we have a relationship already built up, not just started in 2016 with our state police, our sheriff's officials, our Capitol Police, but also the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office. That we're vigilant, and as I said, we have in place a process where we have members of the Secretary of State's office, employees of the Secretary of State's office, who become, not already in the elections division, become our election liaisons. And you don't know where they're going to show up. You don't know what precinct they're going to be in. You don't know where they're going to be. So that's that physical presence that we also have on election day, and in early voting also.
Gentlemen, do you have any thoughts about election security and what, if anything else, should be done to secure that?
What I hear is complaints from the county clerk saying that some of those people that she sends out have no idea what they're doing in the election process. They say they're more in the way than they are actually taking care of oversight of the election process. There's a degree of training that needs to take place, both at the county clerk's level as well as people from the Secretary of State's office that are sent out to observe the elections. And so there's this disgruntlement among the county clerks as to what the process. It's not being taken seriously. They are not training ahead of time. It's a pro forma. They're just doing it for the sake of saying that they sent officials out.
Can I counter that?
Well,
He is absolutely, I'm sorry, Julie.
sure.
But I guess I'll counter, unless you have something to say now.
Yeah, I just want-
too, so I'll counter both of you guys if I have to.
Don't jump the gun.
I know.
With respect to hacking, I think the greatest area of vulnerability is voter registration. Online voter registration. There have been incidences in other states. Harrisonburg, Virginia had some 20 people that were submitted fraudulently. That's where the state office and the county officers have to work very close together. At the local level, they have to monitor what names come in. That's how it was found there. It was happenstance, but if you're vigilant in looking at the new names that come in and keeping an eye on things, you can diminish the vulnerability in that respect. With respect to the election processes, I found some small incidences in the primary this past year at the local level. I don't think it stems from deficiencies at the Secretary of State's office, where people who were registered in a third party, the Libertarian Party, were in some cases told they couldn't vote, despite there being the nonpartisan ballot for the judges. In other cases, they were told they could vote, but they had to vote in the Republican or Democratic primaries. And in some cases, they said, okay, then I'll go ahead and vote. So registered as Libertarian, there were people who voted in a Republican or Democratic primary last spring. That's a matter of training, and that's where you need to have comedy and trust from the up top down to the local level. I don't think you can say, I just hear this talk at the local level blaming everybody at top, nor can you say everything at the top has been done perfectly in getting the people at the county level to be trained and to know what they need to do. That's a matter of communication and working together.
And that is exactly what takes place. We have the poll workers who are trained. And John makes a point, all the more reason to have employees of the Secretary of State's office who are out on Election Day and early voting. They are trained. To even have the utterance that they're not trained, that they don't know what they're doing, is preposterous. We're not sending anybody out there who doesn't have a good grasp of what the machines are doing. They're designed and they are assigned to a specific county. And so if their specific county is voting on optical scan, they're going to know about optical scan voting. If it's the DRE, they're going to know about that. And that is taking place. And I recognize that throughout this next hour and a half or so, and throughout the next 4 weeks, that's the focus that Mac has to take. I mean, he's running against a Secretary of State, an incumbent. And no, we're not perfect, John. And that's why I like to come to these meetings to get some ideas from you all that, wonder what they're saying that we might not be seeing. But I recognize that he has to take a hit around every corner. But don't diminish the work of the employees of the Secretary of State's office. You want to hit somebody, you hit me.
And the point is, that's not Mac Warner saying that they're not trained. That is county clerks. So I encourage you as investigative reporters, a newspaper, to talk to the county clerks and see what the county clerks are saying about those people that are coming out and the training or the lack of training that they're getting and the credibility that they put on the current Secretary of State. It is simply not there.
I encourage you to talk to all the county clerks. Because he's making this general opinion.
Do you have any clerks we should talk to?
Absolutely.
You want to name them?
To start the counties, Cabell County, Kanawha County, Putnam County, Wood County, Braxton County, Barber County, Ohio County. Talk to the clerks. I've been to all 55 counties. I've talked to probably 45 of the clerks, and I don't know of one that is satisfied or happy with the current Secretary of State. So go talk to any of them. Talk to the present and the current president and the past president of the county associations. Talk to Susan Thomas in Harrison County. Talk to Dwayne Miller. Go talk to them. I encourage you to.
Since we're talking about, I know that you all will get into some other questions too. Do talk to them. Talk to Susan Thomas about how we worked with her when there was a mistake on the ballot already sent out. Did she mention that? Talk to some of the other county clerks. We have our employees who work in the county clerk's office sometimes. For instance, in 2014, the Monongalia County clerk needed employees. She couldn't get people hired. She couldn't get people to work there. So we sent an employee from the Secretary of State's office. We paid the salary, we paid all the benefits and everything in helping those county clerks. We're doing the same in Putnam County. We did it, unfortunately, and had to do it in Clay County when Connie Workman lost her son. You guys know the story, Eric Workman, the state trooper. So, you're going to have anecdotal stories, and that's fine because we're not perfect. We're not perfect, and there may be different approaches. Think about this, though. You all have covered these stories before. Phil's in the State House. Whitney used to be there. 99% of what we do in the Secretary of State's office is only authorized through the legislature. So we've had much of the work that we're doing authorized through the legislature. And as of late especially, it's certainly bipartisan, the successes that we've had with our Veterans Initiative that waived the startup fees, that our participation in the Electronic Registration Information Center that is identifying people who have the opportunity to get registered and vote. That's bipartisan. So, we'll talk about whatever you talk about, and then I'll present the facts as they are taking place in the office.
What else? Whitney?
Mr. Buckley, I think you're the only Libertarian candidate we've had in here this go around with candidate meetings. Can you sort of briefly explain the Libertarian Party's standpoint and in particular how that party or how that platform might apply to the Secretary of State's office?
Sure. The Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in West Virginia. It's the third largest political party in the nation. It's, by conventional political terms, it's fiscally conservative, it's socially moderate or tolerant or open-minded. It's a mixture. And I think, to me, it brings together the best of what the two major parties have to offer. And so the Libertarian Party, it doesn't fit into, oh, we're a wing of this major party or a wing of that major party. We're for smaller government. And that means lower taxes, deregulation, cutting spending, and personal liberty. Recognizing that in a free society, people are different, and we should embrace and accommodate the differences of people to live their lives as they see fit, so long as they're not violating the rights of anyone else. For Secretary of State, the philosophy, it's largely an administrative job. And I think all three of us have the administrative credentials and experience and qualifications to do a competent job in this office. There's an overlay to the Secretary of State's race that doesn't have to do with libertarian philosophy. It has to do with who's running on what party ticket. And frankly, I have in my car, but I didn't wear it in, a referee jersey, because I was going to wear a referee jersey and have a little yellow flag and throw it when I hear the stuff going back and forth of the constant bickering between Republicans and Democrats. And that, in fact, is one of the reasons why I'm running. Because I think of all the offices statewide where a libertarian could do a very good job for the public, and that would be to put a libertarian as Secretary of State, as the chief elections officer. Someone in the public would say, oh, if you speak out on photo ID at the polls, or if you speak out on this, or if you speak out on that, it's not coming from a partisan direction of the two parties that have all the rest of the elected offices in West Virginia, other than the nonpartisan positions. And I think if of all the races, why not a libertarian as Secretary of State? I think it would give the public a lot of comfort that no one's got their thumb on the scale in what reforms are being done with respect to voter registration, encouraging the vote, and online registration, fair campaign practices, and all that sort of thing. So there is no particular libertarian philosophy other than competent good government and small government. But I think there's an awful lot of the voters out there who are sick and tired of the partisan bickering. And I think this job is tailor-made for someone from a different perspective than Republican or Democrat.
Okay, do either of you have a response to anything you just said?
I would say, John mentioned when I say this, that vote for the person, not the party. He's talking about just the Libertarian Party and vote for them, but I say look at the results that I've delivered as Secretary of State. Look at the money that we've saved, the cost-saving measures that it's the processes that we've implemented. Yes, I'm a Democrat. Yes, it's a political race, but it's not in the office. The work is done. We serve all members of our society, starting a business in our administrative law division and our elections division especially. You know, when I go around the state, I hear from all candidates running what help they've received in their race from the elections division. So, I mean, that's what I would say to that answer. That I'm proud of the work that we've done for our businesses. We are streamlining, and there are improvements to be made, no question about it. And we're well on our way in setting that up. When you can implement cost-saving measures and you can cut down on costs, and I haven't grown the Secretary of State's office, but we've given back even more than $4 million from the budget cuts and previously, because I just don't spend money. I spend it wisely on what should be spent that we can grow in the proper areas. The same with our veterans, the same with elections.
I don't have necessarily a rebuttal to John's comments, but from Natalie's comments, spending money wisely, when we just sent out postcards to people across the state, encouraging them to vote here within the 30 days prior to the election, simply averting or skirting the trinkets law, that's nothing but a pure attempt to drive people to a website that then is covered with the Natalie Tennant name. That's all that was. So I think 30 or more of the county clerks have complained about doing this a couple weeks prior to early voting. If you did not get the press release in the last day or two, look for it, because it went out by all the county clerks who were disgruntled, saying, wait a second, she's throwing this on us, not pre-planned, not talked to, not asking them if it was a good idea, simply said this is top down from the Secretary of State's office, sending postcards out, and deceased people, numerous folks who are deceased receive these postcards and their loved ones encouraging them to register to vote. One woman here in Kanawha County said that her son died a year ago, and then she's getting this request. Senator Sue Klein's husband died 3 years ago, and she gets a postcard encouraging him to register to vote. They were offended by it. This is callous. This is insensitive on the part of state officials doing that. That's not wise use of our taxpayer money. Opening a Secretary of State's office in Fairmont that is rarely used. Why Fairmont? Why not Martinsburg? Why not Beckley? Why not Wheeling? Parkersburg, one of the larger cities. Why are we opening a Secretary of State's office in the Secretary of State's home county? It makes no sense. So don't just take those words of platitude of spending government money wisely as sacred or truth. It's not. Thank you.
Can you follow up down there?
Max, speaking about the trinkets law, during this, over the course of the summer, you made some accusations about a ethics complaint that was filed against Natalie and characterized it as having reached the probable cause stage when in fact it was dismissed by the probable cause review board without any further consideration. Is that explain that mischaracterization on your part?
But you need to get your facts straight. Okay, there was a probable cause determination. That's why we went forward. And then they said, no, we're within 30 days or 60 days of the primary, so they kicked it past. And then it went on into the summer time frame. And again, when they then looked at it, they excused it on a technicality. The rules had changed between the time that they initially passed it. She misused the government-funded trinkets at the elementary school in Winfield. And then they came back and said, well, they changed their interpretation of that. So she slid now on a technicality. So it wasn't me getting things wrong. I didn't file the complaint. I was simply wondering why the Ethics Commission was taking so long to do this, because it looked like they were simply trying to kick it past the general election. And then why do we have a complaint system if all you're going to do is kick it past the time when it would have any effect on a government official in office prior to an election? This occurred back in December of last year, and it took them until August to make a determination. That was the only question that I had.
Still think you're confusing the presentation of a complaint to the probable cause review board with being probable cause. That every complaint goes to the review board for review.
And it could have been stopped back in January or February. And had the Secretary of State decided to answer the question at that time, it could have been put to rest, but it wasn't. And so they found that there was probable cause to hold the hearing, which is what happened in the August time frame. So let's get our facts straight. And don't mischaracterize what my portion of this is, as I think you may have done in one of your pieces.
Probably there was a hearing.
It was a determination that there was probable cause to send it to a hearing.
You're still confusing the process, I think.
Still, my question would, should it take from December until August to make a determination when the kids went home with these trinkets in their hands and it got to the delegate from that area and he's the one who filed the complaint on behalf of his constituents? I don't think it should take that long.
Response.
Phil,
You see,
you are Mr. Ethics Commission, are you not? As a reporter who was on it
covered it since its inception.
Exactly. And we know that you have it correct. And it is easy to see that this was a gotcha type of complaint that was filed. Yes, the action is in question in December of 2015, filed in January, information sent in 2015, filed in January of 16, all the information, because due process, thank goodness for due process. Due process takes time. So February it comes out. Phil, I can just depend on you that you will get the facts correct. There was no probable cause. You have to have a hearing to determine if there is probable cause. And we probably received, and I don't believe that I'm overstepping, because in the Secretary of State's office, we all obviously offer due process. as a Secretary of State who's had more investigations and more convictions on election law violations, we are on it. So I understand due process, and I don't believe I'm overstepping my boundaries when I say that the record, I mean, that's the beauty of it, is in presenting the record, in presenting our work. Yes, there was a pencil given out, and I can only say that apparently it did have our name on it. Yes, we were there, so yes. But we showed the evidence and the facts that there was no intent on it. It was human error. We have human beings who work in the Secretary of State's office, and it was human error. And we had document after document. I think we probably had about 14 pieces of evidence to show the Ethics Commission. They probably made about 10 different phone calls to the Secretary of State's office. And it takes a little time, and it takes due process. And I felt that this was a gotcha type of complaint when the delegate files a complaint and then runs to the media. Do you think it is? And so I'm just thankful that we were given our due process and able to give the facts, that we complied with the ever-changing law. And Phil, I don't know if you were the one covering it or who else was there in 2015, when it's gone through many iterations, the ethics and the trinkets bill, as it's known. It's gone through many iterations, and as a matter of fact, the rules, the agency rules, weren't even passed until March of 2016. So, I mean, this is a gotcha type of thing. So I guess I need to also go back. I mean, I have to set the facts straight. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I mean, MAC is making all of these allegations. And I'd first like to address the cards that have gone out. What is wrong with getting people registered to vote? What is wrong with Americans having their right to vote, West Virginians having the right to be registered to vote? I know personally what some residents of West Virginia feel when they receive a piece of mail that's addressed to a loved one. My mom has been gone for 5 years, and my dad still receives pieces of mail, especially this time of year. When you have those magazines that are selling stuff, my mom was a sucker for all those magazines. So we're getting all kinds of those this time of the year. And I know that it is hurtful when people receive that. I'll tell you about someone that you won't know, and I'll get to that, but I want to get to why they may have received them. Because we are part of the Electronic Registration Information Center that was started by a nonprofit. First started by Pew, now it's run by a nonprofit, and actually the states that become a part of it are on the board of directors then. They're the directors of it. And guess what? It was passed by the legislature in, I don't know, February, maybe early March. So for the county clerks to say that they don't know anything about it is a misrepresentation of what is taking place. We have talked about the ERIC project for years. And I'll tell you what we receive from county clerks, Mac. Right here, I mean, Lena is our elections director, and she's in constant contact with employees of county clerks' offices and the county clerks themselves. And so, folks knew that the ERIC process was coming up, that fortunately we had it passed by the legislature. This was going to be a great program to clean up voter rolls. That's what I hear from my opponent, maybe not John so much, but certainly Mac. And here's what we get from Jefferson County. Thank you for all the work your office has put into making cross-state registrations and cancellations more reliable. I appreciate the information, and Jefferson County has eagerly awaited the institution of ERIC for quite some time. We look forward to seeing it in action. That's what we receive. Because this process is about mostly cleaning up the voter rolls. that you don't have duplicates, that someone moved to Ohio or Virginia or Pennsylvania, that there aren't duplicates. So now we have the ability to say, well, this person can't be registered in both places. It matches DMV, Social Security, the post office. And so in this, part of this program is also notifying people who have the ability, are eligible but not just registered. And wouldn't we be doing it now when we have 1 week left of, till the end of voter registration? So yes, we sent out these cards. And I sent it out in the face of criticism from people. That's what we want in a leader, isn't it? Somebody's going to do their job whether it's good for them politically or not. So we have sent these out. And the way they work is that you match DMV. And if the DMV sees that someone is over 18 and eligible to vote, then it will send it back to the voter registration or match it up with the U.S. Postal Service, also, of course, the Social Security database. And I've had folks who have called and said, why are we getting this? And I say, well, maybe one of these databases is not correct. It still has your loved one living. And I asked her if I could use this as an example, and she said yes. You all know Kim Aaron. She's our magistrate. She called the office. I called her back personally. And she said, Natalie, Adam, when I got that, her son Adam died this spring. She said, when I got that, it was devastating to me. And I said, I understand completely. And I said, but here's what happened probably. She said she canceled his driver's license and she canceled his voter registration. And I said, well, they could have matched it up then with Social Security or with the Postal Service. And do you know what she did? She moved his mail from Virginia, where he was in law school, to the post office here, so she would get any mail that he might miss. Well, guess what that did? That said, he's eligible to vote. Let's see if he's registered. He's not registered. He has the ability. It's tough. It's a tough process. And I was in Boone County on Friday, and I talked to them.
Is there an opportunity?
Yeah.
But I'm getting hit on my road to go.
We're getting the filibuster here. I'd love to have to say something about this question myself.
But that's
Okay.
the thing, John. This is a complicated process, and it should
Just
be.
asking for the ground rules. Is there any time limit to our answers?
We didn't set up any time limits because we like to give people the time they need to cover the ground they
Okay.
want to cover. So when I think she's talked enough, I will interrupt her and
I'm
ask her
almost
to.
finished, 'cause I just
So
wanna
let's
say
wrap
this.
it up, Natalie. Thanks.
This is it, Boone County. I was down there, and I said to Gary, is the county clerk, Pam is the deputy clerk in charge of elections. I said, you guys been getting any phone calls? He said, no, not at all. I said, I wouldn't think you did, because you know why? They went through this process in 2012. Same with Lincoln County. Everybody likes to talk about the South, right? I saw the county clerk on Saturday, and I said, you guys getting any phone calls? No, we're not getting any phone calls at all, because they've already gone through the process. It is a process, and it is complex, and it should be. And so, and that's what we want, right? We want clean databases.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
ahead,
Yes,
John, I'm
sir.
sorry.
Thanks. Here's where I'd like to throw my yellow flag and say this kind of bickering is what turns the public off to politicians and elections and the whole system. Why a lot of people just use this cynical view to say, I'm not going to participate, I don't want to get involved, it doesn't really matter, there's just constant back and forth and back and forth. A lot of this is just disingenuous. Let's go back to why there's a trinkets law. Let's go back to why politicians in office do what they can as legitimately as possible to get their names before the public as close to election day as possible. These things have been going on for decades, and the public gets tired of it. And so there are rules to try to stop this kind of thing, and yet everyone knows that you can't tell unless you've got the time to do the investigation of the average public. You're just hearing Republican versus Democrat, Democrat versus Republican, Republican versus Democrat, and people get sick of it. There's a reason for a trinkets law, and it's a good reason. When there are violations, they should be strictly enforced. If they're de minimis, they should be told this was a violation, but it was de minimis. When there are allowances for the politicians to do all sorts of things in the run-up to election time, we need to focus on what's going on behind the scenes. How we stop all that, I'm not sure. But it is partisan bickering that turns the public off completely. And I would love to throw a yellow flag at this point and say, while there's good criticism and there are good responses, the overlay of all this is political bickering ad nauseum.
I would like to say, I keep looking at this, and I know that you mentioned this, John. If you take a look at the postcard and we put it out publicly, it doesn't have my name on it. I mean, so
If
there's
it
no
drives
tribute.
people to your website, or when you call the Secretary of State's office, the answer isn't Secretary of State's office, how can I help you? It's Natalie Tennant's Secretary of State's office, how can I help you? Constantly, all the time, every single time I have ever called in. Now, that's fine, that's legitimate, there's no rule or law against it. I think it turns the public off. And I think that kind of thing is the game playing in politics that needs to be stopped. And I think there's a time and a place, Secretary of State's office race this year might be a very good time and place to say, time out, 10-yard penalty. 10-yard penalty, let's get somebody new in here.
See, what you all are missing is that people have the right to get registered to vote.
No one's objected to that, and I think that's
But that's what
terrific.
you're saying. You're saying that you're sending this out, and as a matter of fact, do you know what that is when people call? It's called common courtesy to state your name. I grew up in a household, 7 kids.
Wait, your name when the receptionist
We were
answers.
required to say, tenant residence, Natalie speaking, because it's a common courtesy. People get confused out
Then I would
there.
have to say
all
the
right.
People's Secretary of State
When they
office.
say West Virginia Secretary of
That's who
State's
it is.
office, Natalie Tennant, Nancy speaking.
I think Joe Manchin started that tradition. Mr. Warner, is there anything else
Yes,
you'd like to add?
please. First of all, back to one pencil. One pencil? I want to make sure that the record is clear. That is what she alleges was passed out, one pencil. I think Phil put it in his column attacking me that I made a big deal out of one pencil. I think it was more than one pencil. I saw a photograph of a coloring book with Natalie Tennant's picture on it that was passed out as well, that the child came home with. So let's not minimize the realities, the facts. The facts don't change, okay? So let's go talk to the child and the complainant and the person who filed the ethics complaint, Michael Moffett, to get things straight and not mischaracterize the truth. The second point is, why now? John just said it, because it's a couple weeks before the election and it drives people to the website where her name is prominent. This is not coming from Mac, this is coming from county clerks that I talked to who said, why is she doing that now a couple weeks prior? It should have been done, if anything, right after the primary. It could have been done 6 months ago. It could have been done a year ago. Why the emphasis right here a couple weeks prior that drives people to our website? That is coming from the county clerks. So this is disingenuous on the Secretary of State's part. I think she was going to get one by on the public. And it's not just a yellow flag. This is something that the people deserve. They deserve propriety from their government officials. And just, this is something, notice the passing of the buck. It was somebody else's problem to get those lists straight. No, as the chief election officer, before something goes out of her office, she is responsible, and it's her job to get things cleaned up before it goes to deceased relatives that reopens wounds that aren't healed yet about the passing of a loved one. Let's not do that. The government has enough problems. Let's not add to this discontent by the public with government officials by their callous nature of trying to drive people to a website.
Okay, I think we've covered this issue. You guys ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay.
I would just like to say that we
Very
officially
briefly.
joined ERIC at the end of September, and that was part of the process. And look at Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Ohio, that have done the same thing. This is about an election process and making it available to people to be able to get registered to vote.
Okay, so thinking ahead, if you were Secretary of State, are there any changes to the law you would pursue or advocate that has anything to do with the office? Anything at all you'd like to see changed?
I think it's
Go ahead, sir.
I think there are significant ambiguities in the election laws. I think it's come up before the Supreme Court this year. I think it came up 2 years ago. I think there needs to be a wholesale review to clear these things up. Sure, the laws have to be passed by the legislature. The Secretary of State's office ought to have a great deal of input in recommending how these things play out. For third parties and independents, the rules are very confusing. When I filed, or wanted to file, my certificate of announcement back in January, the list of which then gets posted on the Secretary of State's website and is used by the media to determine who are the candidates this year so far. I was told that I cannot file my certificate of announcement until I've been nominated by my party. even though Republicans and Democrats seeking to be nominated by their party in the primary could file their certificates of announcement. So articles were written about who's in the race, and my name wasn't on that website, so my name wasn't listed because I wasn't in the race yet officially. That works to the detriment, since name recognition for candidates is an important thing. That's unfair to small party candidates. Now, small party candidates aren't all that successful, so most people would say, no loss, no foul, not a big deal, de minimis. It's a trinkets law matter. But it's important to the election process. That's one example. I think, yes, the election laws are very confusing, and they haven't been cleared up by the state Supreme Court's decision in Mr. Wells's case. The determination of when, under what circumstances you can run as a quote-unquote independent, a non-party candidate, when you have to switch your party affiliation, if you had one, by what time in order to run under a no-party label. It's very confusing now, and I think, yes, there needs to be a significant review, and it's got to be done, obviously, in cooperation with the legislature. So there are many elections, and I think the circumstances of this year sort of highlight that it's time to sit down with the legislature and go over that and see if we can come up with a package of good ideas to improve things.
Okay, Mr. Warner, I thought you were.
Yeah, I'd like to see some change in the rules on the funding. I would like to close some of the dark money, but at the same time open up the contribution levels to candidates to more in line with the federal rules. I think limiting candidates to $1,000 limit in contributions makes it very difficult for a challenger. There's so many benefits already to an incumbent, and limiting people to only be able to raise $1,000 at a time. I'd like to see that raised up to the $2,600, $2,700 that the federal folks are. But at the same time, I think make more open the process by which the dark money comes into play. So those are the types of things I think we ought to take up with the legislature.
So how much can you do to regulate dark money under Citizens United?
Well, there's not much when it comes from the Supreme Court, but we can all advocate for that. We can pass our state laws as to how things are handled within the state, how the reporting of that takes place. So they put a number of days on it, it needs to be reported within a certain amount of time.
Okay. Laws, changes?
We can continue to work when we see there is legislation that needs to be addressed. I agree there's too much money in politics, and Citizens United would certainly do a lot. And unfortunately, John and I tried. Well, no, you liked Citizens United, didn't you?
I like free speech. Yeah, characterize it that way.
So there is too much money. You know, I hear this story or this point a lot that, you know, the reporting area. I mean, think about this. Is a parent who's, you know, home, grabbing something to eat, watching the 6 o'clock news and seeing a commercial and seeing a commercial on and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go to the website and see who paid for that commercial. I don't believe that is realistic. That's why we should not have so much money in politics and give, you know, somebody who has the ability to give a $50,000 check as opposed to, you know, a $1,000 check. You know, John is right when he talks about, you know, an overhaul of some of the election laws, and you're right. You know, there was no clear decision. Well, maybe a clear decision. You know, when you had the federal judge overturn what the Supreme Court ruled. So, you know, we're looking to do that, and next year is not an election year. And Phil knows that what happens during election year is very little election law is discussed in the legislature. So 2017 legislative session would be a very good year to focus even more on some of our election laws. What I also, you know, I do the umbrella. I'm charged as Secretary of State of all of the unique statutory duties we have. I still push for sole proprietors registering with the Secretary of State's office. We register corporations, limited liability companies, and they have to go through our office. So a sole proprietor, though, goes through the tax department. And the problem with that is that they have the same name as someone who's under a corporation in the Secretary of State's office, so the databases are not meshed. And there is a perfect example of this, and you all will know who this is. We have the Phillips Group, that's a sole proprietor, and they are a marketing firm that works with Republican candidates. And we have the Phillips Group, that's an LLC, registered in the Secretary of State's office. They're a marketing firm that works with Democrats, and they're out of Charleston. So you see, if we were under the same database, that would be helpful to the businesses. So that's one change.
Both run by good people.
I know, exactly. Very good people. Bill Phillips and Laura Phillips. We've got to continue the work of automatic voter registration that this bipartisan support from this legislature passed this last legislative session, and continue the work. Business for West Virginia has been around, and as a business portal, we need to continue that enhancement, and certainly using some of the legislative authority that was given to share that information among agencies also. So that's some work that maybe not necessarily continued law changes you were asking, but continued work.
Can I add one election law reform that I promoted in the last session of the legislature? It didn't get anywhere, but I hope it will. That is the rule that for parties to be recognized, they have to have a candidate for governor that gets over 1% of the vote. I urged Delegate Pat McKeon, Republican, Delegate Isaac Sponicle, my delegate, Democrat, to push a bill that would make any one of the 6 statewide office races of the threshold race, 1% in any of those. Because what happens now, if a group wants to be a player in our political system and doesn't necessarily have a candidate or doesn't want to have a candidate for governor, in order to be recognized, you have to run and you have to hope you get that 1%. There are 2 small parties that have gotten it. There's one aspiring small party that has not reached that threshold, but all have to be players in the gubernatorial race no matter what, or they lose the opportunity for 4 years to have the advantages of being a recognized political party. I hope the legislature will look in with favor on a step like that or in that direction to open up the system a little bit. Libertarians issued our candidates for all 6 of the races. I don't know how we're going to do in those races, but I think there are times when a political party or group of citizens that have a political perspective and want to be involved may want to focus on one race or another, but the governor's race, the one opportunity every 4 years, is the only opportunity, and it artificially drives small parties and aspiring parties to come up with a candidate and get into the governor's race. And it may sometimes distort the outcome in the governor's race. I don't know whether our governor's race is going to be all that close this year. But it would be a shame if a governor's race were determined based on a tiny vote for a small party that had to run a candidate for governor just to be in the political process.
Okay, thank you.
Not yet.
What else?
I have a question for Mr. Warner. In your opening statement, you mentioned about you're all about easy registering, easy voting. But when we talked about this in the primary in this room, we'd had a discussion about that, and you had said that you felt like that it was so easy to register that was leading to low voter turnout because people weren't taking it seriously, and that you thought it'd be better to put more effort into registering to vote, to make people work for it.
I didn't say to make people work for it.
Well, I mean, you were talking about if you're educated about the process, if you go through the process, you might be more willing to get out and vote. So it seems like a change.
Where this is coming from is George Soros, and he pushed a number of Secretary of State races, this being one of them, to have the open registrations, to push the automatic registrations. The whole idea is to drive people, citizens, non-citizens, felons, no matter what, get them in and get them registered, because that's alleged, or his intent is to have more votes for the Democratic Party. That's the underlying theme that's going on here, okay? And so that's why you have Secretaries of State like ours that's out there on the leading edge. We're one of 4 states that's pushing this automatic registration at DMV and every opportunity that we can. And my point is, then look at the results of that. When you look at the Pew results, we're at the very bottom of voter participation. And there's a corollary there, or there's a cause and effect there. When you just register people as much and as many as you can, as often as you can, but they're not the ones pushing it. There's not a desire on their part necessarily to be an active voter, to be an educated person in the electoral process, then they lose interest. There is no desire to vote, so they don't go to the polls to vote. So then you have West Virginia at the bottom of the list of voter participation, looking like we're an apathetic society, and I really don't think that that's the case. I think that we're very unjust, particularly in an election like this year. But it takes somebody who wants to vote, and yes, you have to attach responsibility with the freedoms, and the responsibility is you need to go in, and this is again coming not from MAC, this is coming from the county clerk saying we would like for them, when they do this, to fill it out properly, have the proper addresses, have proper signatures, be able to verify this. If there's a question about when they put down rural route 2, where is that along the 60 miles, in a particular county? We need to be able to put them into a precinct and put them there properly. So the county clerks are the ones that want the person who is registering to vote to have some responsibility in that process, and not just drive people, give it to them willy-nilly just because they're 18 years old, we're going to sign them up to vote. That's my point. I'm not trying to make it hard on anybody. I simply want them to be responsible citizens, and that they be citizens when they register to vote.
But if you make it easy for people to register to vote and then they don't go out and vote, how does that help George Soros?
Take the other side of it. When you have an open border and you let people in and you register them, whether they're citizens or not citizens, whether they're felons or not, you register everybody automatically. Some people, you can go get your driver's license without being a citizen, but you go to get the driver's license, you automatically register, you automatically register. Now that's an opportunity for irregularities in the voting process. Somebody can file for an absentee ballot and get it at that point. And if there isn't somebody paying attention to it, and that's the problem here, is we're not paying attention to trying to clean up the voter rolls, watch the process closely, and that's what you'll have with Mac Warner, Secretary of State, working with the county clerks and empowering the county clerks in every way possible. When they ask for the list, I will provide them the list. When they say, tell me where people have moved, don't make me go in there on one by one and get those names, but give me everybody who's moved out of Braxton County. I will work with them and send it to them. That's the complaints that's coming from the county clerks, is they're not getting the cooperation from the Secretary of State's office.
Well, how will you make it easier to register, like you said in your opening statement?
I'm not against the online registration. I'm simply wanting them to do it properly. So we work within the system as you set that up online. And this was the problem that I mentioned in the primary. When our current Secretary of State put this out, she put it out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and closed it for comment at 8 o'clock the following morning. Berserk, saying we haven't had time to review this and give you adequate comment about what we need to register these people properly. And so the postcards are coming in, or the registrations are coming in online, and they have to then apply their time from an already short-staffed office to go back and find that person to try to get the registration proper. And again, here in Caddo County, we had the person vote who signed the name Hart XOXO. That's not a proper signature, and that person voted in the primary. Those are the things that drive the county clerks berserk, and they want cooperation from the Secretary of State's office. I will give them that cooperation and that communication.
Yeah, John, go.
Natalie wants the last word. I think it is the job, it's part of the function of the Secretary of State to be the cheerleader for voter registration and voter turnout. That's part of the job, and that should be encouraged. And yes, there are concerns about the accuracy of the voter rolls. There's concerns about the percentage of voters that turn out, and it makes us look bad. And I don't want people to vote who aren't familiar with what are the issues and the candidates. On the other hand, I want people to vote because I think it encourages confidence in our political system. So you've got these tensions, and I think the Secretary of State's office is leave the other concerns to other policymakers, but be a rah-rah advocate of voter registration and voter turnout. Acknowledging that who votes and in what percentages and what demographic of the population votes, soccer moms versus ruralists, has a big effect on the outcome of elections. And so we know that, and that's part of the strategy of the political parties, and that's why everybody's cynical about the process of voter registration and voter turnout, because they're wondering who's manipulating whom, because there's no trust any longer in our political system. And if it sounds redundant for me to say that time and again, I'll just take the risk of sounding redundant. There is a problem in our political system, and people are growing steadily more cynical about politics and fairness and democracy in America. And I don't know the answers to that, but I do think that is a problem. And if we don't recognize that and begin to try to affect it, we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. At the local level, perhaps, why not convene a citizens committee of representatives of the political parties and civic advocate groups to work with the county clerk to say, here's the last batch of voter registrations that came in this month. We're concerned, are these accurate? Are these real? Is there fraud? What can we correct the records and details? These things can work, or at least they can be tried, or maybe they'll lead to better ideas, but I think we need to improve the aspect of voter registration, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
John, you talk about, why are people upset and getting turned off in politics. You know why? Because you have a Secretary of State candidate sitting up here trying to make excuses of why he doesn't want to get registered people to vote. That is unconscionable to me. And that's why I was looking at you guys. Like, come on. We got to question that guy to pieces about why he would not want people registered to vote. Because he's heard a few anecdotal things here and there, and he's trying to use it to score political points. Let's put that aside and let's just focus, all three of us together, of how we're going to get people registered to vote. And then when we come and present the facts and the ideas, have you heard any ideas? I've heard a few here and there. But that's what I say when I say, I've delivered on my ideas. We've worked on that. I mean, I don't even know where to start, and I don't know if you guys want all of this. Automatic voter registration is, there are 30-some states doing it. Why do we have to be last? Why can't West Virginia lead the way when it comes to automatic voter registration? Because it's coming, folks. It is coming. Why can't we lead the way? Why can't we for our citizens? And do you guys recognize, and you've done stories about this, automatic voter registration requires a person's driver's license and last four of their Social Security. Do you realize what a paper application requires? Those numbers would be good. Those ID numbers would be good, but they don't have to be. So here you are. Somebody's going to get registered to vote without a driver's license number or their last four Social Security number on a paper ballot. So why don't we make it streamlined, modernized, and have it so folks can look through? I mean, go down, I got a picture on here if you guys want to see this. In Boone County, Pam is down there doing this. She's like, Natalie, they have these special filing cabinets that are this wide because that's the cards. And instead of having to dig through to see if someone's there, isn't it make it great to go online, or not to go online, to go to the statewide voter registration system or their own system? Mac has said this before. The counties want to see it. Do you know who makes up the statewide voter registration system? Do you know what makes up the statewide voter registration system? Those people who are registered in the counties. The Help America Vote Act required the Secretary of State or a centralized location to have a statewide voter registration system. But it's only as good as what the counties put in. So for him to say that they're not getting information, or we're not sharing it, is incorrect and not fair. Their information is what goes in the statewide voter registration system, and they can see their own county, and they can see that information. We are recognized for the work that we've done in the Secretary of State's office across the state, not the Secretary of State's office, because it's about election administration. The Pew Center for the States does their every 2 years election performance index. And we went from number 45 to number 26. I'm not happy with 26. I want to be number 1. Of course I want to be number 1. Is that wrong? Is that wrong that we've improved our election administration? To be knocked for that? And then, you know what? It becomes this fear. We're going to let anybody just get registered to vote. No. When you sign that information, you are signing it you're attesting to it under perjury, under the guise of perjury if you do that. And so, we scare people in saying that folks are going to get registered. Well, the driver's license, our driver's license, you can get a driver's license, then you're part of that system. And talking about felons. Do you all realize that felons, after they've served their time, after they've served their parole and not on probation anymore, they get to vote? What better way to give someone a second chance, and two, get them back in society and feel like they have worth? I do talk to people. In Boone County again, I had a big day on Friday, talking with the adult learning centers. And they were saying, Natalie, some of these people are like, wow, what good is it to go to adult learning center if I'm not going to get a job because I'm a former felon? I believe in second chances. And I think that one step of saying, yes, we recognize you as a citizen, as a voter of West Virginia, is a start. And that's what I remind folks of. I would love for you all to do a separate story. Now, I know I'm going to take political hits on it, because remember, people voted for a felon in West Virginia. I know I'm going to take political hits on it, but you know what? It's about doing the right thing. You guys can hit me. You can hit me all you want, and these guys can hit me all you want. But I'm just standing up. I understand this process. I know the office. We've made great strides, and I'm going to continue to do the right thing no matter what people say.
Folks, if deceased people are getting cards, felons who haven't finished the parole are probably getting cards.
And you know what?
Back to the Pew issue. The Pew issue, we increased from 46 to 25 or whatever. Why did we do that? Because she started reporting the data, and simply reporting the data alone, whether the data is good or bad, simply reporting the data moves you up in the Pew studies. And also take a look at the Republicans that had the get out the vote efforts in 2012 and 2014. That pushed the voter increase. So she's taking credit for something that caused the state legislature to turn Republican. So be careful of her taking credit for things that she had nothing to do with, other than reporting what needed to be reported anyway.
We had 37% voter turnout in 2014.
I think that
Anything else down there? All right. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.